All right, mate. I see that you're ready and raring to go with the podcast on the floor of your bedroom and me in my chair. So it doesn't get any glitzy than that for our dinner parties. So just wanted to kick off really, following on the first episode of Look Who's Coming for Dinner. We've gone through the centuries and picking our guests out. Now it's back to the current period. So I'm going to kick off, mate, on who's coming to dinner, my gaff, in terms of the five guests that I've chosen. In no particular order, there'd be Sophia Loren, Ricky Gervais, Boris Johnson, Brian Cox, and Nigella Lawson. How about you, mate? Who's coming over for dinner?
Hi everyone, I've got Tim Peaks coming over, Sarah Marquez, David Munoz, Sir David Attenborough, and the man of all one lines, Clint Eastwood.
That doesn't surprise me. Ever since I've known you, you've been a fan of Clint. So, yeah, I guess he's coming for dinner. So I'm going to kick off with Sophia Loren. I've been a fan. Love all things Italy, which kind of made my choice quite easy for me in terms of the food, the history, and the country. So Sophia was an obvious choice as my first guest. Serving lobster tail spaghetti, nothing but the best. The reason why I chose Sophia was for many reasons. One of which was the impact that she made as an actress, being the best export that Italy's ever produced on the acting side, and that she would inject that whole Hollywood golden glamour to proceedings of the dinner party. So Sophia was, one of the most beautiful women in the world. She started her acting career actually after winning a beauty contest at the age of 14. And she actually won 6 David Di Donatelli awards for Best Actress, giving her the record as the woman who's won the most of these awards, and the Honorary Academy Award and 5 Special Golden Globes. So she basically in the 1970s thought, right, that's it. I'm really done with the big kind of acting career, and took a break from it all to concentrate on having a family in the 1970s. And she didn't quite reach the same kind of pedigree as she did prior to that. But some of the iconic films are, for me, The Fall of the Roman Empire and El Cid with Charlton Heston. But it wasn't always one way with Sophia. In 1982, she was convicted. I don't know if you know this, mate, but she was convicted of tax evasion and given a 30-day sentence, which she
Wow.
only served. Yeah, she only served 17 days, but still, that's quite something. It surprised me when I found that out. So, questions to Sophia. My first question, as I couldn't help but ask this one, how did she feel from being an iconic superstar, megastar, Queen of Italy, to ending up in a grotty Italian jail? Second question, which male actor did she enjoy acting with the most? Was it our Charlton Heston? And the last question, did she have any regrets for largely stopping her film career early in the 1970s? And does she think Hollywood glamour is better or worse now?
Wow. Great questions, Johnny. Who knows what she thought when she sat in that grotty jail? But for a lady of her class, it was clearly a place she didn't want to be. But, when it comes to the whole Hollywood glamour and starting a family, I think that all goes hand in hand, Johnny. I'm sure from what I've read about her, it was all about being able to start a family and give her time to her family and not get caught up in that whole Hollywood glitz of traveling away and this, that, and everything else, and not being there for a family. But in terms of what actor, Charlton Heston, what a great guy. But I put it to you, Johnny, that back in 1958, it was known that she had an affair with the very debonair Cary Grant. So maybe, maybe Cary Grant was the man that she most enjoyed working with. Who
Well,
knows?
who knows? While the cat's away, the mice will play, and maybe the mice played in this instance. And after all, it was Kerry, the leading man amongst all others. What about you, mate? First guest coming in.
Well, I've got Tim Peaks coming over for a bit of gambas. For those of you that don't know what gambas is, it's prawns, and Spanish love prawns. So I hope Tim enjoys the way I've cooked it with a little bit of garlic.
Did you cook it or did your wife cook it, considering she's Spanish?
Me, always me. Men are the cooks.
Wow.
Oh, better not say that too loud.
Yeah.
So, so yes, right. So Tim's sitting here enjoying a glass of wine with my wife sitting over there in the corner. And let me tell you about Tim. So Tim Peakes, 48, British major in the Army Air Corps, but most known for the fact that he was the first British European Space Agency astronaut and the second astronaut to bear the UK flag. Tim was the man that went off to the International Space Station and back in 2016 did that very famous Happy New Year speech broadcasted by the BBC. So I would love to just ask Tim about what it was like in space. Because he also did the first spacewalk outside of the International Space Station for a British astronaut in space, which is a wonderful achievement. And I just wonder, what was it like looking back down on all of us on the big blue planet?
Don't you think it would be a bit of a come down for you, considering after your other dinner party, speaking to Neil Armstrong and going to the moon? So you've gone from the moon to then speak to Tim. You know, it's would it feel like second best, or will you still be very interested in what he's got to say after Neil's been around at your gaff?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm sure that Neil Armstrong and Tim Peakes would have some fantastic conversations. But at the end of the day, Johnny, it's all about what's current. And
Yeah.
I want to know what's next. I want to know what's next on the agenda. I want to know, where are we going to go moving forward? Are we going to try and explore a little bit further out? I'm sure Tim might know a thing or two about what's going on behind the scenes in terms of space exploration, or whether there's another trip back to the International Space Station. Absolutely love hearing about our achievements and where we're going to go with it. But also, I'd love to ask Tim, what was it like learning Russian? Because apparently that was the hardest bit for him. He learned Russian, Johnny. You had to learn Russian to fly that rocket. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty poor when it comes to languages. And if you said to me, Rob, my life is in your hands, you've got to fly this rocket and you've got to learn Russian, well, you might as well forget about it, Johnny. Make sure you got your seatbelt on, because we're not going to go anywhere too fast.
Absolutely, mate. We barely speak English well. So speaking Russian.
Speak for yourself,
Yeah,
Johnny.
well, yeah, I guess what you mean. But doing a podcast and then learning that Tim was also fluent in Russian is quite something. But yeah, if I let you go on about space, we'll be here all night, because I know how much you love it. So moving on, back to my gaff. So from one queen to another queen. My second dinner guest is the one and only Nigella Lawson, the #1 home cook in the UK of all home cooks. Again, like Sophia, she adds a lot of glamour and charisma to proceedings. What's not to like? She has changed our TV sets when it comes to food programs, along with Keith Floyd being the first. So a little bit of background on Nigella, daughter of ex-Chancellor Nigel Lawson, who served under Margaret Thatcher, and she came from a refined family background. Her mother, Vanessa, was an heiress born into Lyons Coffee House dynasty. She started her cooking programs around in 1999 with Nigella Bites. Can you believe that's what? Wow, over 23 years ago. How time goes by. And the rest, well, is history. She's become a national treasure. So I'm not going to go into a great spiel about Nigella, because you can all Google her for your own selves. But in terms of my questions, apart from the fact that one of her main food mentors was Nigel Slater, she's a big admirer of, because she loves his food and style, and apparently a big Chelsea supporter as well, for a quirky fact. I suppose you can't have anything, mate. You can't have everything, Nigella, supporting Chelsea as well. So what I would ask Nigella is the following. Did she ever think cooking, coming from that kind of background, would be her calling in life? And does her fame surprise her? Secondly, I would ask rather, what makes a great cook and chef? Is it purely on the amount of Michelin stars that a cook or a chef has, or that really doesn't come into it? It's more about the love and passion for the food. And lastly, her opinions on how cooking has now become a reality TV industry, a celebrity industry, with the likes of Gordon Ramsay and Gino D'Ampio, if I pronounced his name correctly. So those would be my three killer questions at the dinner party. Over to you.
Fantastic questions, Johnny. Yes, I mean, I love watching Nigella. I just love when she opens up a drawer or a cupboard and pulls out another kitchen utensil and gone, I've bought this in preparation for something I might need it for later on. She just has a tool for everything. It's incredible. But for me, Nigella is all about family. She's all about cooking for her family and her friends. And she does say that that is one of the core beliefs when it comes to her style of cooking, is that it should be about fun. And she's always got her family around her. And yeah, I think, Johnny, we live in a social media world. It's all about celebrity this and celebrity that. It wouldn't surprise me if you have another program called Celebrity Chef, Get Me Out of Here. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
there's always something going on, you know, with regards to social media and what they class as a celebrity. For me, I don't think Nigella gets caught up in the whole celebrity status. She's become who she is because of who she is. But her cooking is fantastic.
Not
There
only
is a
her cooking, mate. Not only her cooking, her use of words.
yeah.
I don't know about you, but the way she uses the English language and some of the words that she uses, some of which I confess I have to Google, I think it boils down to the time she spent at Oxford University, where she studied medieval and modern languages. But that use of language and how she delivers it is intoxicating. And that's one of her USPs, to be honest with you. That's what kind of gets me, apart from her dishes that she serves.
Well, you know what, Johnny? I was also reading, and I don't, you know, read this magazine. I was just doing a little bit of Googling as we've been talking. And I think it
You've
was the
got all her
magazine.
magazines, Robert.
Yeah, I think it was the magazine womanandhome.com. But they were saying 9 things you didn't know about Nigella Lawson. And one of those things, and yeah, brilliant. Apparently she likes hairy men.
Well, we'll be all right.
Yeah,
We'll be more
great.
than all right. I think we'll be definitely Nigella's calling because let's face it, mate, we've got enough hair for more than most men. But I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Well,
Even more why she's coming round for dinner. Even more. What about you, mate? Back at your house.
Well, I've got the very great David Munoz coming over. And I apologise, David, if I've said your second name wrong. Let me tell you about
Wouldn't
David.
be the first time, everybody. We all know the use of names is not our forte.
Well, David and Nigella are probably, you know, would hit it off like fireworks would, because at the end of the day, David is 41 and he is a top, Johnny, and I mean top Spanish chef. So he's coming round to test my gambas and tell me where I've gone wrong. But what I love about David,
but didn't Tim have your gambas? Didn't Tim have your gambas?
Well, no, it's 2 starters.
Oh, they're still sharing it. Okay, all right.
No, two starters. I've got 2 people over for starters, Johnny.
Okay, mate. All right. You run your parties you want.
Right. Okay. So I've got David Munoz, Spanish chef, 3 Michelin stars, and he's only 41 years old. Apparently, he said many years ago that his passion for food started as a child because his parents wouldn't let him play basketball. Well, you know what? He has become a fantastic chef. He has unique style of mixing Asian markets with a Spanish twist. And I had the great pleasure to go to his restaurant, Street XO in Mayfair, and I loved the food. I sat there and it melted in my mouth. And I love my spices and I like my bit of chili. And I have my wife telling me this isn't normal for Spanish cooking. But you had that Spanish cooking mixed with the Asian market twist. And I know David is well traveled. And some of those restaurants he used to work at in London, like Nobu, well-known restaurants out there, or more commonly known as Hakkasan. I'd love to ask David what inspired him to mix Asian food with Spanish food. What made him do that? I know that he had a great laugh and he was inspired by Abraham Garcia from his Madrid restaurant, Firidiana. But I just love to know what inspired David. Second question, I only had to read the other day, and I cannot believe it, and I'm in shock because of the pandemic. Street XO is closed down.
Oh, what a shame.
What a shame.
Yeah.
Restaurant has closed down. It's another casualty in the city of London, as many other restaurants have probably gone the same way elsewhere in the country and around the world. So I'd love to ask David, what's he going to do next? Is he going to just carry on managing those restaurants in Spain, or is he going to open up something new here in, England?
Well, I feel like I've been to that restaurant because I remember you texted me how nice it was, and you were giving me a running commentary in your dinner at David Manoss's restaurant. So I was in there. I was there with you in spirit on how nice it was. But you're right. What next? I suppose he's a bit of a rock star. He's a bit edgy, and his kind of creativity reminds me of that great Spanish restaurant El Bulli in Barcelona, which was
Yep.
iconic and voted the #1 restaurant in the world. So I suppose, Rob, someone like that, there'll be a new challenge on the horizon and there'll be a new restaurant popping up somewhere. So yeah, it would be a great question. It'd be a
Come
great
back,
question.
David. Come back, David. I love your food.
Yeah, well, I also feel like I love your food, but I've not been, but maybe one day. Um, Now back to my gaff. Dinner, meat and 2 veg. And that can only be for our very own current PM, Mr. Controversial, Boris Johnson. So we're both Londoners. We know Boris Johnson. We know of Boris Johnson. I know you've met Boris Johnson, but we know of Boris Johnson, who is our ex-mayor of London. And he basically is one of the new kind of reality TV media turned journalist into leader. So you've got Trump, obviously, with his Apprentice show and reality TV and what he did, everybody knows about, unless you haven't been on this planet. And then Boris Johnson from the likes of, Have I Got News for You, and his Telegraph articles about bendy bananas, giving him the fame and notoriety that I think only Boris has truly carried off, in terms of acting the buffoon and getting away with the clangers and the odd affair here and there. But he has that kind of magnetic charm that seems to attract all before him and also detract. So because he's quite a Marmite figure. But do you know this, mate? His first name is not Boris, it's actually Alexander. And if you think about it, how
I
many...
did not know that.
Yeah. He cultivated Boris. And do you know, if you think about it, really, politicians around this planet, there's not many that's just known only by their first name, Boris, but he's one of them, if not the only one. So he was born in New York. He claims to have had the United Nations running through his ancestry and genetics. Every nationality has been through his gene pool. His father is a former turned EU politician, prolific book writer. And speaking about celebrity, Get Me Out Here, I think he was on that show. I think he did rather well in that show. But he's amassed a fortune and managed to sell one of his pads for 11.5 million in Mayfair. So not too bad, mate, not too bad. But basically, Boris came from a privileged background. His mother is an artist who suffers Parkinson's. And he went to Oxford, but never got that first degree that he wanted in the classics, whilst his great nemesis, David Cameron, did. So he's our Teflon man, where no scandal or crisis ever seems to stick. And he has the ability to overcome most things. So why did I invite Boris over to my dinner party? I suppose because of his controversial type character and the fact that he is the life and soul of the party. I think I remember the Brexit debate when Amber Rudd and also Nicholas Soames once said, whatever you say about Boris, he makes a bloody good dinner guest. So I think he would inject, the kind of banter. He'd be throwing some knowledge about the classics, about the ancient history. He probably would have loved to be more in my other dinner party, to be honest with you, mixing with Julius Caesar. But he's also one that I would also inquire about, his kind of antics. I think he's fathered like 5 or 6 children by different women. So he's a colourful guy in every sense of the word. But Boris, he could end up being one of the most written politicians of our time, to be honest. So these are the questions that I would ask Boris in the end. If he knew what he knew today, that his premiership would be under the greatest health crisis since the Spanish flu, in the pandemic we're all going through, which nearly cost his life. He ended up in ICU. Would he have still gone for it? Despite that overriding ambition, which I think his sister Rachel Johnson once said, he wanted to be king of the world. My second question would be, was it really true that he wrote 2 articles, one for Remain and one for Brexit? And lastly, what does he think Winston Churchill, his great hero and biographer of, would say about him today? Those are my 3 questions that I was speaking about over the meat and 2 veg with our Boris Johnson.
I think they're great questions, Johnny. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in Boris Johnson's house. I totally agree and
my
concur.
house.
Yes. Well, I'm just talking about Boris Johnson in general, Johnny.
Fair enough,
or in your house. I would certainly concur. I think he is certainly a man that would uplift any party and get the mood going in the right direction if it needed it. As I said to you previously, I met Boris Johnson for a very, very small duration of time. And I asked him the question, Boris, do you think you'll be Prime Minister one day? He probably wouldn't remember who I am, but he might remember that question being asked. But he's probably been asked that question a million times back in those days. But that was in the run up to Brexit. And he said, well, you never know. Watch this space. I think it was something along those lines. And I knew. I think everyone knew that Boris Johnson would become Prime Minister. And therefore, Johnny, the answer to your question about would he do it all again? I think he would. I think with that drive and that ambition, he would certainly do it all again. Absolutely. And what would Churchill say? Well, who knows? But I would like to be a fly on the wall in that conversation.
You certainly like to be a fly on the wall in many conversations, but I agree with you. They're
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, it's true. Who wouldn't? It's food for thought, excuse the pun. But yeah, I'm quite pleased to have him at my dinner party because it would be interesting to say that way.
What do you think Churchill would say?
Churchill, obviously, is just an opinion like us all. I think he would have a certain admiration for how he is in terms of personality, i.e. his charisma and his ability to captivate an audience, because he's a great campaigner. He's a great,
Agree.
And he's great at writing a speech and knocking out a joke or 2. Whether he would question his fortitude of character, I mean, it's like chalk and cheese. If people's listening out there, might be screaming at us because you're comparing a great wartime leader with Boris Johnson. But some say we're all going through a war. It's just with an invisible enemy, with the pandemic, just not with troops on the ground. So before we go too dark and deep, let's refresh it. Let's move over to Rob's Who's next?
Right. Well, it's dinner time, and I've got Sir David Attenborough sitting here. If you don't know who Sir David Attenborough is, go and Google Sir David Attenborough. But I'm absolutely sure every listener listening to this and any listener listening to this around the world will know who Sir David Attenborough is. He's 94 years old, Johnny, still going strong, as we know. And just recently on Netflix had his program about his personal witness statement about where he sees the world is going. I love David Attenborough for everything that he stands for. I would want to talk to David Attenborough about the planet, about the issues, and about where he thinks things are going. I know he said where he believes things are going, but I want to know what he thinks um, life will be like on this planet in 100 years' time, or what life could be like on this planet in the next 20 if we do something about it. I want to know more about it. I want to sit down and have a chat. But also, I want to talk to him about all those great adventures he had, in the jungles, in the deserts, islands and the sea. Incredible, incredible man, incredible life. And the fact that he's still got all his own hair, which I'm envious about.
I've still got mine.
Yeah, well, still got most of it. At
Yeah, some of it.
94, I would just like to sit down and have a chat with him. But one funny thing about David Attenborough, he's one of these great personalities. He's got that voice which is absolutely, you're mesmerized by his voice. And when he applied for a job, Johnny, back in the 50s to the BBC, first of all, he got rejected on his first application. And then when he did get a job working for the BBC, apparently the person that was in charge, quite high up, I believe her name at the time was Mary Adams, said, or initially tried to discourage Sir David Attenborough from actually appearing on TV because she thought allegedly his teeth were too big. I mean, how crazy is that? So I'd love to ask David Attenborough, what would he say to Mary Adams today, considering he is one of Britain's greatest national treasures?
What a legend. You can't, no one can speak highly enough of him, to be honest, but what a sliding doors moment, eh? If she had her way, us, the country, wouldn't have had him on our, such an impact that he's made to our programs, our TV sets, to the environment, to the climate debate, to the animal kingdom, you name it. But absolute legend. Yeah, I must admit, I would also like to hear a thing or two of what he has to say. My guess is not quite as legendary back at my house, but he certainly would crack a joke or two, and if not, maybe even sabotage the dinner party. So my next guest is Ricky Gervais. So I chose Ricky because I think he mixes intelligence with humor. Why do I say that? Because a lot of Ricky Gervais's humor is about, observing kind of society, human behavior, and then making light of it and mocking it. So let's face it, let's get real. The reason I invited Ricky is because I love The Office, and his whole thing with David Brent, well, for me, is legendary. It's absolutely legendary. And The Office, for those of you who've ever watched The Office, who's ever worked in The Office, it was one of those iconic programs that when you go into work, you'd be relaying it back to your colleague. And it was more funny when you were telling the story of The Office and David Brent than sometimes when you were actually watching it. So that really was largely my focus because of being such a great fan of The Office. But he was also good friends with our very own English teacher back at our school, Mrs. Ball. Prior to the day, it was prior to these days of his big breakthrough. But he was friends with Mrs. Ball, our English teacher. I remember that. It's stuck in my head. Probably one of the few things that I was paying attention to in our class. But most iconic moment for me is, apart from The Office, he's done other big career highlights. For all any of you that have watched his hosting of the Golden Globe, some of the cutting edge humor that he had to Hollywood. I think he did a record 5 times presentation of it. But his jokes around Mel Gibson, let's put it that way, pin you in stitches. But I've chosen Ricky as well because I think he would also inject some kind of intellectual debate to proceedings whilst cracking jokes in amongst everything. But the reason I would ask Ricky around as well would be some tips on podcasting. People out there might say you need some tips you do on podcasting, but his podcast, which was aptly named the Ricky Gervais podcast, is still in the Guinness Book of Records. Did you know that? Yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
Most downloaded podcast in history, apparently.
Well, he is the great Ricky Gervais. I mean, come on. I mean, I need to go and have a listen to that one, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, you've elevated his surname, Gervais, but whether you call him Gervais or Ricky Gervais, whatever takes your fancy, he's at my dinner party to give you and I some needed tips on podcasting. But he's also been voted in the Telegraph as one of the most top 100 powerful people in British culture. So what would I ask Ricky? The following questions, really. After his earlier failures in with his show and attempted music career, for all of you that don't know this, Ricky actually managed a pop group called Suede back in the 1980s. And then he decided to cut off Suede and go out on his own as a duet. And he had a top single, apparently, mate, of all places in the Philippines. They seem to have...
How funny.
Yeah.
It sounds like a sketch straight out of The Office.
Yeah, apparently the song was called More to Lose. So I will be looking that up on YouTube myself to see how that sounded. But he seemed to have been very popular in the Philippines. So my question is, did he ever believe, after the earlier failures with his music career and his earlier kind of show, that he would be the success, they would have the success he's had now? Second question, what made him decide on comedy? And how did he meet Stephen Merchant, his great co-author of The Office? And lastly, I have to ask, would The Office be his most proud achievement to date? Those are my questions.
Great questions, Johnny. Who knows about The Office? I mean, I found The Office incredibly funny. I know the Americans try to do their version and it, nowhere near the British version. I will never forget that clip when he was asked to do the motivational speech and he ran into that room with that big ghetto blaster on his shoulder and he put it down. He's like, "Hey, if you're a loser, get out of here." And he was just absolutely brilliant. But there were some other very notable characters within his sketches that have gone on now to do big TV film productions as well. So I probably say The Office probably is his greatest achievement because it also launched a career of so many others from The Office. But I love his drama, Afterlife as well, and some of his films are just funny. He brings that real raw British humor back to American films. And it's interesting because he's a writer, he's a producer, he's a director, Johnny. And especially when you look at the kind of American movie type characters and their actors and their actresses, that film Special Correspondent, where you got Ricky Gervais in it with, I think it's Erica, what's his surname? Who played Batman?
I don't know, mate, actually.
No, it escapes me. But Ricky was brilliant absolutely brilliant in it. And you sometimes ask yourself the question, um, crikey, America's changing, because years and years ago, having somebody like Ricky Gervais in your movies in America probably wouldn't have taken off, but those films would be nothing without him. So I think he's so funny, and
I
he's
agree with you.
incredibly clever.
Yeah, he's very clever. I would say comedy wise, Afterlife series, yes, but film wise, I think he's a bit of a flop for my taste. And the comedy side, his stand-ups, The Office, everything else, I totally agree with you. But nevertheless, we both are in agreement. He's an undeniable talent. Um,
That's it. Eric Banner. I knew it would come back to me.
mate,
Eric Banner and Ricky Gervais, those two together, unlikely in the sense that you would have probably never put Ricky with Eric Banner, but they work, and they work well in that movie. It's a funny film.
thanks, mate. I wouldn't have been able to sleep without him. That bit of a man.
Go
Uh,
and watch it, Johnny. It's a funny film,
I,
and you'll
I,
see
I
what
will.
Ricky brings to that movie.
I would. I will look into it, mate. I will look into it.
But it's a
Now,
great British sarcasm.
yeah, yeah, and it's not missed on us either. Now over to you.
Well, I've got none other than Clint Eastwood, the man with all the one lines. Um, I love Clint Eastwood. I don't think there are many people out there that would say that they don't love Clint Eastwood and his incredibly famous one lines. I mean, let's talk about Clint, 90 years old. Um, and he is a man of the ladies, Johnny. Off stage, on stage, it is well documented that Clint Eastwood has probably dated some of the most beautiful women in Hollywood. He's had leading ladies as girlfriends. He's been known for his intense relationships off stage. He's been known as well for um, affairs, and all sorts of things have gone on. But Clint is not a classically trained actor, but he has become one of Hollywood's greatest actors, and not just an actor. He's involved in music. He's a very talented director. And when he started off, Johnny, just like Sean Connery in My Last Dinner, he had been a lifeguard. He had been a paper carrier. He had been a golf caddy, a firefighter, fighting forest fires. Clint has done it all, you know, and yet he is so known for those spaghetti westerns of the 60s. I believe it was Rawhide that actually launched his career as an internationally acclaimed actor, and then he went on to do all of those great western movies like A Fistful of Dollars, Man with No Name, and then the brilliant Dirty Harry movies. And do you remember that very famous line that he always said?
I do, but I don't think I'm going to do it justice. Do tell.
Yeah. So let's talk about that very famous line where Clint Eastwood says, "Make my day, punk."
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's probably one of his most famous lines. So, Clint Eastwood is legendary. He's in his 90s, still popular with the ladies, and yet he's a family man. I believe he's got 7 or 8 children that's reported. And, one of the questions I would like to ask Clint Eastwood is that I was reading about things which you might not know about Clint Eastwood. And apparently, back in one of his movies, going back to 1975, where he played a climber in the Eiger Sanction. That was the name of the movie, obviously set in Switzerland in the Alps. Tragically, somebody on the film set lost their life, a man called David Knowles, and they were going to cancel the film. But they decided not to, and Clint Eastwood went on to do all of his own stunts. And I would love to ask him, what did that feel like? Because one of the most famous scenes in that movie, Johnny, he was hanging from a rope 4,000 feet in the air, and he cut himself free to allow the rescuers in the movie to rescue him. Yet he did all of this himself. So what was that like? He did all of his own stunts, climbing a mountain in Switzerland. It's
But
crazy.
bloody terrifying, I would say, from my perspective. Just imagine
Yeah.
that. I hate heights. Cutting yourself, what, 4,000 feet, did you say?
Yeah. It was obviously a scene in a film, but he did his own climbing. And apparently, people were a bit unsure about whether he should be doing these stunts, but he did. I mean, there aren't many Hollywood actors that would actually go, yeah, okay, put myself up there, when actually, tragically, somebody's already died on the film set.
Mm. I know
And yet,
Tom Cruise does a bit himself, but he's not in that
yeah,
league, is it? That's all.
he did all of his own stunts. But
Uh,
Johnny, fascinating guy, colourful guy,
mm.
um, over 60 years in the industry, and still absolutely has it with the ladies. I mean, at his age, brilliant.
It is brilliant, and it carries on a theme for you. You like your strong men, Sean and Clint, and your ladies' men.
Well, I
Um,
just think that Boris Johnson sitting down with Clint Eastwood, I'm sure they could have a conversation or two.
yeah, I'm sure that, they might be able to struggle to remember how many kids they've got a father between the two of them. But yeah, it could be interesting. Let's put it that way. Um, but great guest, great guest. Well, I'm moving away from the world of Hollywood and now moving into my own world of the universe and space in my dinner party, and that's our very own Mr. Brian Cox. So I've been fascinated by this guy. He basically has brought the universe and astronomy to our TV screens. He seems to effortlessly, um, translate physics to the average man, a bit like how Roger Federer plays tennis. It's incredibly mind-blowing the way he can articulate physics and the way he communicates it to all people watching TV in front of him. So it's just I find it incredible anyway. So my favorite programs, I've loved his work, is The Wonders of the Solar System, Wonders of Life, and Stargazing Live with Dara O'Brien. I mean, that is something actually. A Night with the Stars is something I really wanted to get a ticket for. My wife said to me, "Oh, I managed to get you. I was going to get you a ticket for A Night in the Stars, but I didn't get it in the end." So you can see how that went down in my household. Yeah, I just think he's just unbelievable. And do you know, going back to your guest, that he was described, Brian Cox, as the natural successor to David Attenborough and Patrick Moore, because he was the original kind of knight in the sky, wasn't he? Patrick Moore, he was kind
Yeah,
of an
yeah,
eccentric character. But he's got apart from having a PhD in physics and astronomy, he's been an author and co-author of 950 scientific publications. And he's also had a former career in music. He was a
yeah.
keyboard player for the British band Dream and Dare. So, what would I ask Brian as the kind of after dessert drinks are flowing? Ricky's cracking the jokes. We're all sitting there with Nigella's inspired white pavola going down a treak. So, I would ask the following: what is your greatest love? Music or physics? Secondly, why does he think that quite a few notable scientists and physicists have had music backgrounds? And lastly, Brian, do you think we'll ever be able to go back in time?
Brilliant. Well, I wish Brian had come to my house, because he could have sat down with Tim Peaks, or at my last dinner, talked to Neil Armstrong, and Sir Arthur C. Clarke. I mean, Arthur C. Clarke would have had some brilliant conversations about the future with Brian Cox. But Johnny, I think Brian Cox was nicknamed Pop Idol to Science Idol. What a great guy he is. He has a very interesting way and intuitive way of bringing science to the masses in a very easy to understand format. I wanted to go to that show that you were talking about. I would have loved to have gone to that show.
You should have
He
gone.
really does break down science, and I think he'd be a great um, successor of Sir David Attenborough, etc. Brilliant. But the whole music thing, I love that. I mean, come on. Most of these very intelligent people, they're all a little bit eccentric, aren't they?
They
They've all
are. They are eccentric.
creative backgrounds.
And don't you think he looks bloody young?
Yeah, incredible. Yeah,
You know, if you look at him, he's what, in his 50s, isn't he?
yeah. What's his secret? Brian, what's your secret?
I think he does a little bit of plastic surgery, I think. Maybe. I don't know. But he denies it. Allegedly. Allegedly. But great question. Brian, what
Well,
is your secret?
I'll say one thing, Johnny. I would love to be able to go back in time. And if he comes up with a way, if he comes up with a way that we could, I'll be the first signing up for that.
Mate, I'd make sure that you're the first signing up for that. What about you, mate? What's happening around your gaff?
Right. Well, I've got Sarah Marquis here. Um, love a bit of exploring. Who doesn't? Love a bit of traveling. And when people say, "Oh, I've done a little bit of traveling, Johnny, and I've gone for a 2-week holiday somewhere," you think, "Come on, you haven't done any traveling." No traveling like this lady has. 48 years old. She's published several different books, but back in 2010 to 2013, she walked 20,000 kilometers from Siberia through the Gobi Desert into China, down to Thailand, and then by boat to Australia. She got National Geographic's Adventure of the Year. She's done loads of other things as well, like walked 500 miles through Kimberley in Western Australia. She's hiked the Andes in South America for 8 months back in 2008, and she's 48. So I'd love to ask her, what is her driver? What makes her want to do that? I love traveling, but she's done it all on her own. And at times, Johnny, there was very little human contact. So I would love to know, what did she do to keep herself sane for all those hours, all those miles that she was walking when it was just her and, impressively, a cart. She pulled a cart along with her that had all of her supplies and her clothes. And I believe this cart was, a good £120. So she's pulling that as well. What's her motivation? How does she keep herself sane? And also, what was her scariest moment on those journeys?
That's fascinating. You know, I'm just exhausted listening to it. I mean, that's just incredible stamina, incredible bravery. I
Yeah.
mean, let's think about it. In some of those parts of the world, you and I, or most people would have serious reservations, but to be by herself, you know, she sounds like a very strong, capable woman, but still, that is real, you know, going into the unknown. So, didn't she also climb the Andes?
Yeah. 8 months. And she's done other
Wow.
things, kayaking and canoeing, you name it, she's done it. So I'd love to say, Sarah, what's next? And also, yes, there might have been scary moments, but what were your most exhilarating
Mm.
moments? Um, I'm just fascinated um, in what she's achieved at her age and all on her own.
So, did she have like her mobile or anything like that to? keep her company, or, social media even to tweet what she's doing?
Possibly,
Yeah, because that would be
but
just like, if she did that, totally cut off from everything. I mean, that's something, isn't it? That really is, actually.
that is, and I would imagine, Johnny, there were probably some parts in the Gobi Desert, etc., where you're not going to get a mobile phone reception, are you? You're
No,
talking satellite phones at the very least.
yeah, and a filtered kind of Instagram image wouldn't be top of your thoughts either, would it? Really, to be honest, to be surviving and, by making sure that you had the basic like water.
But fantastic stories.
Mm.
And, I love people like her because the stories that she can tell, they just make me envious.
And isn't it, to all good dinner parties, it's all about your stories. It's about the stories. It's about the jokes. It's about the banter. And on that note, I hope you've enjoyed Look Who's Coming to Dinner, Part 2. Until next time, see you later.